Welcome back to Creative Excuses. Today we are going over my original Arcane Archer, now renamed to the Dark Magic Archer and updated for update 47. This is my second oldest tune, my favorite tune, and the one that I have played more than any other. My entire playstyle was built with this character, so I'm pretty excited. Let's jump into it. So just like the previous two subclassing builds on my channel, we are not going to go over every detail of the setup. For that, you can pause the video here and look at the Superstar screenshot, or check out the written build in my Discord linked in the description. There's a forum post in my server dedicated to this build where you can ask questions and get answers if you need them, or you can discuss the build with others. This setup is strong enough to clear veteran Vateshran Hollows with a score of 307 to 309,000 score, which is awesome, and I will be trying to push it as far as I can go without gear swaps very soon. This build is also capable of taking on Harrow Storms, Bastion Mimics, and lots of world bosses, but maybe not all of them without some swaps. It can also prove a very competent group damage dealer for 4-man content with a group that's okay with Oaken Soul users. I will say if you want something for soloing really hard content like veteran DLC dungeons, you should check out Hyperioxes or other solo content creators, or maybe some builds that I'll make in the future. Alrighty, so we aren't talking about every detail, but we are going to need to talk about the skill lines on this Dark Magic Archer because they're very important and they work together really well. First, let's talk about our two core skill lines from the Sorcerer class. You heard that right, we have two skill lines from the Sorcerer class, which means we cannot be any other base class than a Sorcerer. This is a Sorcerer build because you can only ever have two skill lines from your base class. You can only subclass up to one skill line from any other one class. Sorry if you were hoping to play this exact setup on a different class, you're going to have to find something to replace either Stormcalling or Dark Magic with. Luckily, there are plenty of options that you can do that with though. So first up, let's talk about Stormcalling. This is an incredible skill line in both Update 46 and Update 47 for Oaken Soul builds in particular. Even though Update 47 is nerfing the defensive potential of this skill line for 2-bar players, future me here, it's not, that's getting reverted. Nothing changes for us Oaken Soul addicts, but why is this skill line so good still? Well, first, there are the passives, which pull quite a lot of weight. We've got the Capacitor passive, which grants us a healthy amount of magicka, stamina, and health recovery, all of which are useful for our build, and all of which are a very reasonable amount. This is a super simple passive, but it helps us keep away from sustained food, even when sprinting through Vateshran as fast as possible. It also helps keep our magicka up, even when we're using a bunch of magicka skills in content. We've also got Energized, which adds 5% damage to our main spammable, Focused Aim, our light attacks, and the Sundered status effect combined, which account for some 50% or more of our damage on their own. This also adds another 5% to our shock damage, which though a much smaller portion of our damage, it is still nice for our weapon glyph and for one of our active abilities. Stormcalling also comes with Amplitude, which provides a very nice bonus to our damage done at the beginning of a fight and throughout like the first half or so. This is a sort of reverse execute, which means you deal really solid burst damage to push a boss at the beginning, but your damage output will slowly drop over the course of the fight unless you use Bloodthirsty Jewelry or an execute ability to counteract this slow drop. Finally, we have the juiciest passive of them all, Expert Mage, which grants 108 weapon and spell damage per Sorcerer skill slotted on your bar. This passive is super important because if you go all out, it can grant up to 648 weapon and spell damage before buffs. Now, you're almost never going to go all out like that, but if you did, that is an incredibly valuable passive that makes reaching solid weapon and spell damage numbers much easier for small group and solo players. These passives combine to make a very nice offensive base for the build, which is super important because as we're going to see later, one of our skill lines has kind of almost no damage passives. But Stormcalling also brings two very important active abilities for us as well, Critical Surge and Liquid Lightning. Critical Surge is a class ability that I don't think has seen changes in like ages, really. It's a very good ability for solo play and for low healing groups, but it's not all that great in PvP, and it doesn't really give high-end groups access to anything that they couldn't get otherwise, which is why I think this ability hasn't really seen any changes. It just feels solidly balanced, but it is so good for us. Once per second, when we deal critical damage, we are healed for 3,300 before critical heals, which can bump this up to over 5,000 healing. This provides essentially all of the healing that we are going to use on this particular setup. It's worth using on basically any 1-bar build with Stormcalling slotted as a skill line. Don't forget, this is also giving us 108 weapon and spell damage just for being on our bar, which makes it very reasonable to use. Side note, if you need more healing, you can also slot Reaving Blows, the champion point node, alongside this ability to get quite a lot of healing per second, though you are still going to lack a burst heal, of course, which can be dangerous in some content. The other ability from Stormcalling that we want is Liquid Lightning, which is a new thing to want. Lightning Flood and Liquid Lightning were both buffed in Update 46 to finally allow players to take their own conduit synergy, and that is unbelievably important. Abilities always have power budgets, right? Only so much power is supposed to come from a single skill, so when there are effects on an ability that you don't get to use, you end up wasting some of your power budget. For example, I don't really need crowd control abilities in solo PvE, and because of that, any skills that have crowd control on it generally either deal less damage or they cost more resources to use, or sometimes both. Well, Liquid Lightning and Lightning Flood have this great damage dealing synergy on them that takes up a lot of power budget, and for the longest time you were never able to use this synergy yourself. Because of that, when soloing, these area of effect damage over time skills were basically never worth casting. They just didn't deal enough damage to a single target to be worth it outside of group settings, trash packs, or boss fights with tons of ads. Well, now we can take the synergy, so look at the damage that this ability is now dealing for us. The synergy alone is dealing 2.2% of our overall damage, even though it's only hitting a maximum of 3 times during our 3 mil parses, because synergies have a 20-second cooldown if you didn't know that. And we're finishing these parses under 60 seconds. Add in the actual dot damage from Liquid Lightning, and we're getting almost 6% of our damage from this one ability that we're only casting 3 times. That beats out using Poison Injection from my old setup while saving on Sustain, and while giving us much better burst in trash packs because we can pop that synergy for an easy 15 to 30,000 damage in an area of effect. It's honestly great, but it is important that we use Liquid Lightning and not Lightning Flood. This is because Liquid Lightning has a higher damage per cast, and it has a longer duration, which synergizes really well with some of our other abilities and with the synergy cooldown. When you use Liquid Lightning, you only have to cast the ability 3 times in a 60-second window to extract as much damage out of it as possible, because here's the thing. If we look at this parse, we can see that Focused Aim plus Sundered is dealing over 37,000 damage for 1 cast, while 15 ticks of Liquid Lightning is dealing about 36,000 damage for 1 cast. That means it isn't actually worth casting a bare naked Liquid Lightning over Focused Aim. So the only way to make that cast worth it is to have the synergy attached, which catapults a single Liquid Lightning cast up to about 58,000 damage per cast, which is very worth using over our spammable. So Liquid Lightning pulls more weight than Lightning Flood, which is a pretty cool thing. Alright, so that's Stormcalling, but we have the namesake skill line to go over next, and that is Dark Magic. Dark Magic is not a skill line that you're probably seeing anywhere but in PvP builds right now, but having used it quite a lot on this setup, it is very, very close to being an acceptable skill line. Basically, if it had one more damage passive, and probably one more good damage skill, Dark Magic would be a great skill line for basically anyone who doesn't want to use Assassination, and there are 2 reasons, but only 2 reasons why. Crystal Fragments and Exploitation. Future me here? There's another reason why you want Dark Magic in the future, and that's going to come out in a future PTS patch, which is pretty cool. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. Crystal Fragments is an amazing skill. It is fun to use, it hits really hard, it's easy on sustain, and did I mention that it's fun to use? On average, once every 3 ability casts, you should trigger a Crystal Fragments proc where the skill buffs itself by 66%, as in 66% more damage. It costs half as much to cast, and it has an instant cast time. Now first, this ability just hits so hard. With just 12 casts of it, it's dealing 15% of our damage on this parse. And its highest damage hit was 53,000, which is 2,000 higher than our best Focused Aim plus Sundered combination. That is a fantastically powerful semi-spammable that makes every rotation and every parse feel just a little bit different because you've got that element of randomness in there. It is fantastic and is the primary reason to use Dark Magic at all because quite honestly, in solo PvE, every other ability in this skill line sucks. Like, they're terrible, don't use them. Even the other morph of this ability, Crystal Weapon, is crap for solo PvE. It used to be so good and now it's like, don't touch it. This is the only active ability on this entire skill line worth using on a damage dealer or solo build, which is the main reason that you're not going to see this skill line in pretty much any other build guide right now, outside of PvP, where apparently dark magic is kind of popping off. But there is also the exploitation passive, which is actually really good for solo builds. Not really for group builds, but it is really good for solo builds. And that's because it gives you your minor prophecy critical chance buff, which takes your crit chance up by 7%, just like the assassination passives can do. The difference is that we don't get a free 10% critical damage at the same time. If dark magic had that 10% critical damage on it somewhere, this skill line would be much better. Or like, if the persistence passive was replaced with something useful, this skill line could also be great. As it is, on a 1-bar build like this, dark magic is just good. It's not great. If you can make good use of crystal fragments and enjoy the playstyle, it is a very solid B tier skill line if you aren't using assassination. But I will warn you, you can swap over to assassination and use merciless resolve or relentless focus to pull out an additional 2,000 to 4,000 damage per second, even on update 47 with the nerf to merciless resolve and relentless focus. And if you went even harder and you used pierce mark instead of razor caltrops, you can actually pull 60,000 damage on a 3 mil target with assassination active, which is nuts. You can also use Lotus Fan for the same amount of damage and piercing mark, and then if you do like I did here and get some godlike crit luck, you can hit 62,000 DPS on this monstrosity. That's insane, and I have to admit Lotus Fan was really cool to use there, but that's a different build. Dark magic does need a buff for PvE players. Future me here, it's getting one, and holy crap, assassination is still so good. Don't count it out yet. Anyway, dark magic isn't bad though, and it feels thematic. Also remember, crystal fragments is a sorcerer's skill, and that means it's also granting us 108 weapon and spell damage for being on our bar. That means dark magic really might not be worth running on anything but sorcerers that are also running stormcalling. But I'm not totally sure. That extra weapon and spell damage does help out quite a bit though. Okay, so that's the core of the build, but we still have one more skill line, and we've seen this one before. Aedric Spear. This is such a good skill line, and it synergizes so well with this setup. First, we're going to need one ability on our bar to activate one of the more important passives, and so of course, because we don't otherwise have a good class ultimate, we're going to use the Aedric Spear's Crescent Sweep. This ultimate is cheap, it's satisfying to use, it hits plenty hard, and it hits a very nice area of effect. It's kind of perfect for this build. But just as important, it grants us access to the 12% critical damage from the Piercing Spear passive, which makes that extra 7% critical chance from dark magic much more worth it. The Piercing Spear passive is really good. But there are two other great passives just for existing: Burning Light and Balanced Warrior. Burning Light just deals passive damage for us and is responsible for 3.5% of our damage on its own, which is very solid and, I don't know, feels kind of ridiculous. Balanced Warrior also pairs really well with the Stormcalling passive, which is giving a bunch of weapon and spell damage. Removing Balanced Warrior and then applying it is actually showing that we're getting 225 weapon spell damage on this build from this passive, which is pretty solid. It's also giving us a bit more armor, which is always nice. Overall though, these three skill lines combine to make a very fun Arcane Archer, the Dark Magic Archer. You get to feel cool being one of like 3 people in the game still using crystal fragments outside of PvP, and you get to deal very solid damage in the process without relying on anyone else for your buffs or debuffs. Very nice. But like I said, there is so much more that goes into a build, like the food, the potions, champion points, armor weights, armor traits, enchants, and of course, the sets. Pause the video here to see all that information on this superstar screen, but even better, check out my Discord server linked in the description where I have the full written guide. However, this build rotation isn't quite as simple as the other ones that I have shown, so we need to go over that in person right now, not just in the written guide. There are 2 funky aspects to our rotation. There is Lightning Flood's timer, and there's the Razor Caltrops timer for Major Breach. The Lightning Flood timer itself doesn't really matter, but you basically want to make sure you're only casting this ability 3 times during a 3 mil damage target if you're alone. If you're in a group, you can keep this up on cooldown because your allies can take the synergy and that'll work out. But for you, you want to open your rotation with an early Lightning Flood, and then you want to immediately use your ultimate, the Crescent Sweep ultimate. And then you want to grab the synergy for Conduit as soon as possible. This is super helpful to do at the same time because with your natural ultimate regen and your minor heroism from Oaken Soul, your ultimate's going to come back on a 20-second cooldown, meaning every time you're ready to pop your ultimate, you're going to be ready to pop another Lightning Flood and synergy, which just works out super nice for timing that out. The other weird thing though is your caltrops timer. So let's read this tooltip together. You're going to hurl a ball of caltrops that scatter over the target area, dealing some damage every 1 second to enemies inside and reducing their movement speed by 50%. We don't care about that. Enemies who take damage from caltrops have Major Breach applied to them, reducing their physical and spell resistance by 59.48 for 4.1 seconds. That 4-second duration of Major Breach is super important because it means the debuff, which is a huge damage boost, actually lasts 4 seconds after the caltrops effect itself is gone. The reason this matters is that caltrops itself, without Major Breach, deals garbage damage. It hits for 10 ticks per cast at around 22,000 damage per cast on our parse. Remember, our spammable hits for 37,000 damage per cast, so caltrops is never worth casting if you aren't benefiting from the Major Breach. So we do not want to keep caltrops up 100% of the time. We only want to keep Major Breach up 100% of the time. That means if you want to get the most damage out of this setup, you're going to have to get used to casting caltrops at a 14-second interval, which is super funky, but I kind of find it pretty rewarding to do. This means that you need to track the Major Breach debuff on your enemy's debuff bar, or you need to count out 14 ability casts. Or you can let the timer run out on your ability bar and then count 4 abilities, and the 4th one you should be casting caltrops. Any of these methods should be fine, but that is how you get the most damage out of Razor caltrops on most, if not all, 1-bar builds, and probably all solo builds. The bulk of the ability's damage comes from the Major Breach, not from the damage of the cast itself. Now, before you ask, I have tested Wield Soul as the source of Breach, and it's usually a wash on the damage. But caltrops is area of effect, and Wield Soul isn't, which means, for me, caltrops wins for Vateshran because AoE is greater than single target for trash packs and pretty much everything. It works out better. Other than Lightning Flood and Razor caltrops tips though, make sure you're light attack weaving as fast as you can while getting both your light attack and your ability off. Ult on cooldown, and when Crystal Frags turns pink, use that next every single time so that it has a chance of proccing again, because remember, Crystal Frags hits so hard. And that's it. When in content, you're going to keep up your critical surge or you'll die, and have fun with the Dark Magic Archer. Future me is finally here, and wait. This is an update after writing the video. Sometime in the update 47 PTS cycle, we're going to be getting a buff to the Dark Magic skill line, which is going to give us extra max magicka and extra max stamina, and it's probably going to offer the equivalent of roughly 115 to 250 passive weapon and spell damage through increasing our maximum resources. If that goes through, this setup is going to be pretty competitive with the assassination setup, which is awesome. I am looking forward to that buff. There are also going to be some reverts to the other sorcerer skill lines, but none of them should affect this build. Alright, enjoy the rest of this run of Vateshran. I'll probably post it if I score another new personal best on this character, but we'll see. Until next time, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all in the next excuse.
Mehrunes Dagon embodies ambition and destruction. Don't say appreciate such, but ambition.
pleases the exalted.
And with him down, you complete the brimstone.
Well done, outsider. You performed.
You made it all the way to the end. Only one final challenge left. Me? Oh. Ah! What? Oh, magic! I feel it. Tearing me apart!
Pray once more. Feel such power within these walls. Grace over me! Repented for your movement. I consumed your spirit to enter Israel. And now, I shall take yours.
Void Mother. We did not summon such a creature for this challenge. Vateshran's rights now end. You did more than we expected. Well done. Although the spirit blood